Good morning, everybody. We'll get started here in about 5 minutes. We'll let the rest of the people get signed up. If anybody's having any problems hearing me, please let us know. If you're having any problems seeing the screen, please let us know. You can use the chat box at the bottom if you have any questions during the webinar. We'll stop and address those as they come up. So for the few who just joined, we're going to start about 9:05. Let everyone get settled in here. Register. I think we had 46 register. A couple more minutes, we'll get started. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the Finance Client Server end of year webinar. We'll go through all the steps to get your months closed, get your budget entered, go through 1099 printing with Magfiler and authority forms. Again, if you guys have any questions, you can use the chat box at the bottom of your little webinar pane for any questions, and we can address those as they come up. So let's get started. First thing you do, once you have your November month closed and you want to start getting ahead and start looking towards your year end, the first thing you want to do is look at your future month posting. So November has been closed. Your open months are now December 12 and January 01. So your future month is actually January of 2017. So if we run our future posting fund report, this should all be zeros unless you know you've entered receipts or expenses for 2017. If you know an amount, then that's fine. But otherwise, these should be all zeros. Should have all zero totals because we basically don't want anything posted to January month, new year, without us closing. So that looks good. You can keep going forward. If you do have some values for that future fund report, you can run a future posting expense and a future posting revenue to actually see what account they're in, to try to locate those and see exactly what needs corrected. If it needs to be voided out, or use a negative to offset it and then post it in the correct month. So again, these should all be zeros unless you know about the transactions that you've posted to the future. All right. So we don't have any future transactions posted. We can go ahead and get started on our budget upload. So you have a few options. Under your budget control menu, the little money bag, you have your budget transaction processing. This is where you're going to enter revenue budget entries and expense budget entries. If you would like, you can start a new batch. Two things here, the mode. Your mode should be an original, because this is going to be your original budget for 2017, and your batch date needs to have a 2017 date. You want to make sure that this month is 01, so that it doesn't post to your 2016 and override your entire budget that you've had for the year. So make sure, double check both of those things. If they look good, we can update. And if you would like, you can go right into the batch, start a new session, and if you want, you can manually type in revenue accounts. There we go. And you can put in a budget amount just like that and go on. You also have the option to merge in accounts. So if you wanted to merge in, say, all of your revenue accounts, you could just start at 000, 000, and then to all nines. Then you could say merge. And this will merge in all of your revenue account, or all of your expense accounts, I'm sorry, or an expense. And then from here, you could enter your budget for each line item, so on and so forth. Right. The other way that you have to do it is you can use an Excel file and upload the budget from the Excel file. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. So if we're going to update from an Excel file, we'll do the same thing. We'll start in our batch maintenance. We'll get our batch opened, and we'll make sure our mode is O. We'll make sure our month is 01. And then as soon as we have it open, all we want to do is suspend it. So we'll suspend the batch. And if you want, you can write down that batch number so that you know what batch you want to import your Excel file to. So 8483. So a good way that I always think to get the Excel file going is to run these two items to create a list of your expense and revenue accounts. Run it wide open. You can take it out to Excel. Okay. So I fixed that. We'll jump to So this will automatically open for you. I don't know why mine doesn't want to open. Okay, so there's that file that will have all of my expense listings. So yours would pop up and look exactly like this. So this is going to give us all of our accounts, the descriptions, and then we can start adding amounts for our budget. First things you want to do, you want to get rid of any headings. So you want to delete this top row. We also don't want any of this descriptions. So we'll go ahead and highlight and delete this row as well. At the bottom, there will also be a total line. Maybe not. Okay, you're good. So from here, you can go through and enter your budget amounts for each one of these accounts into column B. I'm just going to do a handful of accounts and delete off the rest of these. Okay, so we have our budget entered. All we need to do is save it as a CSV file. So we can do a file, save as. If you want to save it back into your FinX data folder, that's fine. If you want to save it to your desktop or wherever else, that's fine. You will need to know the path to that file and the file name. So we would like to call this our expense budget. I didn't put a space in there because it's a little bit easier. You'll notice in a little bit when we go to upload it, if you don't have a space, just easier to not make that mistake. And make sure that your file type is a CSV. We can go ahead and hit save here. It's always going to ask you this. Do you want to keep this format? You can always say yes. And then when you go to close it, it's going to ask you if you want to save it. We've already saved it, so you can click Don't Save. Okay, so we have our expense budget uploader into Excel. We want to go ahead and start the expense budget upload. That's this step right here. So here's where I said this is the path that it needs to read the file. You'll notice this if you have a field and you need to type in it, you can hit spacebar to bring a cursor into the field, and that way you can type into the field directly. I know my file is out on okay, and this is just the path, not the file on the end. The second field is going to be your file. Okay, and then we tell it whether this is an expense or revenue, and we can say okay. So this is going to tell me there were 0 errors. It found all 79 of my transactions, and it's going to give me a total. If you have any errors, we need to go back to the Excel file, figure out if it's an account or if the amount's not formatted correctly, something along those lines.
No commas.
What's that?
No commas in the amount.
Yeah, and no commas in the amount. So make sure, basically, format it like a text document. You can highlight the whole columns in Excel. Format columns as text. That'll be the easiest way to make sure that doesn't happen. And again, make sure that this is the amount of your upload, so that this should be the total of your expense budget. If that looks good, we can move forward. The second step is going to be our revenue expense budget or process. So this is actually going to move it into our batch. So again, we're going to enter the file name. And this is where we need that batch number. So I started batch 8483. And again, you're going to tell it whether we're doing expense or revenue. This is expense. We'll say OK. And it's going to tell me 79 records came in and were successfully processed. So now we can go back to our expense budget entry. We can use the binoculars and find our batch. The batch should still be suspended. It should now have your budget total in here if everything imported correctly. This should match. If you need to look at it in detail or need to change anything, you can go into the batch, look at your sequence 1, and then you should see all the budget that you imported. Okay. So if any of these needed changed, you could come in and change them here and update. Okay. Again, we enter this in as a 2017 batch of January, and we can only update those in the current month. So you have to have your month closed before you will actually be able to update this batch. Okay. So for now, we can go ahead. We'll come back to this batch in a little bit. We can just suspend it. And the same thing for the revenue side. We can go into our revenue listing. We can run it out to Excel. I'm not going to be able to open the file. Yours will automatically pop up. Oh, missed my X. There's that file. These are going to be all of my revenue accounts. Again, I don't want the headings, so I'm going to go ahead and delete. If you leave those on there, it will throw an error. And we don't need the descriptions, so we want to delete those as well. Go ahead and add in our budget for each of our accounts. Delete these off just to try to speed it. Okay, so we have our budget. Again, no totals. Don't total this. If you want to total it and then delete it, that's fine, just to make sure you have the right number. But always make sure that there's no value in the total field here. So we have everything up into Excel. We want to go ahead and do a save as. Again, you can save it back wherever you're going to remember the path to where it's at, and then save it under the file name that you'll remember as well. So with a new budget, and again, always just make sure it's a CSV file, and then say save. It's going to ask you if you want to keep this format. You can say yes, and close. It'll ask you if you want to save again. Just say don't save. It's already saved. Open up a revenue budget batch. We'll do a new. Again, make sure your mode is an O. This is going to be our original budget or our temporary budget. And we always want to make sure that we're in the correct year, 2017, month 01. So we'll go ahead and update. And batch 8484 is what I'm using. So I'll write that down. And I'll go ahead and I'll suspend my batch. Now I need to do my 2 upload and process steps. First one's going to be my upload. So again, my path will remember the last path I used. So if you save the files to the same area, I've already know that path is good, and now I just need to tell it what file to find in that folder. I called it revenue budget.csv. Remember the file extension on there at the end, or it will not find it. Change this to revenue. Say OK. 0 errors, and found 215 sequences for this amount. If all that looks good, we can keep moving forward. We can do our expense budget process. Again, we type in our file name, include the file extension, and tell it what batch we want to throw it into. Revenue, so we'll say OK. 215 records came in and were successfully processed. So now we can go back and check out our revenue batch. Again, use the binoculars to find your batch. And then this total looks good, and you can always go back in and look at your batch data here. Need to change anything, go ahead and change anything. And then just total this out and suspend it until we get ready to upload it once we close December. Go ahead and suspend. Okay, so now we have our budget entered, ready to go. As soon as we roll into the new year, we can update that so we don't have that lull when people want to enter requisitions and purchase orders at the beginning of the year and there's no budget entered. Our next step is going to be to look over our vendor files for our 1099 records and just basic cleanup. Make sure all of our vendor records are correct. Make sure if we need to inactivate any vendors or we have duplicate vendors that got entered over the year, we can combine those so we don't have those moving into the next year. Our first step, under your accounts payable, you have these vendor reports, so you can do your, what's that?
There's no alpha.
What?
There's no alpha report.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So some of these reports, if you want to look at your vendors for names, like duplicate vendors, you will have to use a user-defined report for that. And probably you probably have one in here from previous years. Okay, so like this. So look for something like this. It might be called vendors, but it's going to be the vendor file and an alphabetical list of vendors. If you don't have this and need to make it, we can make it for you. But then all you want to do is add the fields that you want to see: vendor number, vendor name, whether they're active or inactive, how much they've got paid year to date, the date of their last pay, those kind of items. Once we have those fields, we can run this report. Make sure you have the name up here in the sort field. That's how we'll get the alphabetical sort. When we execute, you want to restrict it to just actives. You can say that. And this will give us a list alphabetically of our vendors. So if you find a couple vendors, maybe these two vendors are actually the same. Yeah. Or like these are the same. So basically I know that I want my 125 vendor was my correct vendor. Vendor 1818 was just entered accidentally, and we need to combine those two together. We can close this. If you go into, again, your accounts payable, Under your special functions menu, you have a vendor renumber. When you pull this up, in the old vendor, you'll want to put the vendor you want to get rid of. So that was 1818. My new vendor is going to be the vendor that was originally there, 125. And it'll tell you, copy 1818 to 125. So all the pay records and all that data will be moved over and combined, basically, these vendors together under the 125 vendor number. Authorize this. And now you just have that one vendor. So go through, make sure all of those, you don't have any multiple vendors in there. You can also run the summary purchases listing. Again, if you want to see just people that were paid this year, you can do a year-to-date amount of 0.01 in your starting. And that'll show you just vendors that were paid this year, if you'd like that report. So that'll show us all of our vendors. This is another good check for your 1099 to make sure, you know, if a vendor got paid over $600, if they need a 1099, make sure that they show up there. You can run the vendor status listing again, run it wide open. If you want to see, if you want to cut it off by the last paid date to try to find maybe some inactive vendors, you can do that. So if I'd say, I can probably inactivate any vendors that I haven't paid since 2014. So if I run that vendor status listing and I want to see my date paid, my ending, I could put in 12/31 of 14. And this will now show me any vendor that basically hasn't been paid since 2014. And this list would help you narrow down, and if we don't need these vendors, we could inactivate them. So for example, we have someone that hasn't been paid since 2009, our vendor 200. If we need to inactivate them, we can go into our vendor maintenance, pull up our vendor, and change the status from an A to an I. And then we can update. If you ever do need the vendor again in the current year, you can always pull them back up and reactivate them, create purchase orders for them, anything like that. Okay, so you've done your vendor housekeeping. Make sure your vendor files look good. So now we need to determine what carryover POs we need to have. We're going to start in our purchasing menu and our purchase order reporting. And we want to run an open PO status report. Again, you run it wide open. And this will show us all the POs that we have and their balances. Anything with a zero balance, or if you know it's got $1 and it just needs to be closed, we need to get those POs closed using the PO open close function so that they don't become carryover POs. Once you have all that fixed, this list should be an exact copy of what you want to bring over as carryover POs into 2017. So proof that really well. Make sure only the carryover POs are on this list. The second item that we want to look at is our encumbrance by account and fund. Again, we want to do a balance as of and cut it off at 12/31. Balance unrestricted should give you the same thing as long as you haven't entered any vouchers with PO with a January date. But just to be on the safe side, you can run it with a 12/31/16 restriction. So this we want to go through and we want to basically see if we have any negatives. If we have any negative line items on a PO, they need to be adjusted and fixed before we carry them over into the new year. Another thing you may notice on this, you have some of these V's with the voucher. This is just a voucher without a PO attached. We'll go over those here in a little bit. But basically just go through, make sure that any of your negative line items, if they're attached to a PO, that they get fixed. Let's see if we have it in here. Again, the negatives here are just going to be encumbered vouchers, and we're going to deal with those in a second. Okay, doesn't look like we have any, but if you find a PO that has a negative line item on it, you want to go into PO maintenance, or PO entry, sorry, pull up your PO. On the encumber tab, you'll want to change, if this amount is negative, you'll want to change that into a positive using the adjust here. You always remember to balance it with your detail and then update the PO. Okay, so if we run our encumber by PO, again, do your balance as of 12/31/16. So this will list all of our POs, their balance, and their encumbrances. But you'll notice at the very bottom of this, it'll give us a list of these vouchers that are not encumbered on a PO. If you were to close the month and carry these over, they're going to be expensed against your 2017 budget. You cannot carry over a voucher and use the prior year encumbrances. So it's not a problem to carry them over. Just be aware that they will be expensed against your 2017 budget. If you have any of these out here and you know that they need to be ran into a check before the end of the year, you need to make sure you run those, run a check process, get them cleared out, and then rerun this encumber by PO report to make sure you don't have any of these on here unless you intend to carry them over. So now we have all of our carryover POs in order. Now we would need to just make any adjusting transaction entries. If you have any bank interest, any bank receipt money that you need to enter, make sure you enter those transactions. Basically similar to any other month closing. A lot of those month closing transactions, same thing for December. Enter all those in, and then we can begin to balance the month. Once we have all of those adjusting entries put in, like I said, we need to balance the month. So we'll go over to our accounts payables. Go ahead and run our end of month balancing report. Anything with a star out here will be out of balance. This is a test database, so almost everything is out of balance. But you'll want to go ahead and do your normal monthly balancing process. Go through whatever that process is, go through and balance the month of December. I would probably go ahead and start this early. You could even start today, because if we do have any balancing issues, some of those can take a while to figure out and find the issues. And the sooner we get started on that, you're not going to be held up when it actually comes to close to month. So start early, check back often for the balancing of the month. So now we're towards the end of December. Our month is in balance. we have our budget entered. We have our carryover POs all entered. We're done with our check runs. We are ready to close the month and the year. You have the option to run 1099 before you close the month, or you can run 1099s after you close the month. Doesn't make a difference. We're going to go ahead and, as if we were going to go ahead and run our POs before we close the month, or our 1099s, excuse me, before we close the month. So in your accounts payable menu, under your end of month processing, you have a few 1099 options down here. Our first step is going to be to process the 1099 records. And you just need to tell it the year. Tell it 2016 and say OK. So our file has been built for 2016. Okay. We can go ahead and run the 1099 backup proof. Again, run it wide open. And this will give us a list of all of the vendors that should get a 1099. If you remember back, we ran a summary purchase report, and it had quite a few vendors on it that have seemed to get paid more than $600, and they need a 1099. So I would come back and rerun that summary purchases listing. I would cut off my year-to-date at, or starting at 600. And so now I can see anyone that got paid more than $600 and figure out if they need a 1099 or not. Corporations don't need a 1099, but let's say our Civica 125 vendor should have gotten a 1099. So we'll go ahead and figure out why they did not get, or are not on our report. We go into their file maintenance. We can go to our 1099, and you notice, so they did have some M 1099 expenses, but it was only $85, so the system thought that it did not need it because it was only $85, and the $838 was coded as an N for no 1099. So we can fix this by editing our 1099 data. Again, back under, you have your manual 1099 data. If we click on this, it's going to ask us for the vendor. We can give it that vendor number. It will pull in this 1099 amount, and over on the break, you'll find those two fields that we just saw. So basically, we want to move this amount all into the M column. So 923.59. We want to put that here. And then we can go ahead and delete the N row. So now they will get a 1099-M for 923.59. Again, if you need to change any vendor addresses, that can be done here as well. And when you go to update, you can update both, which will update the current 1099 record that's going to be printed and the vendor file maintenance. You can update just the 1099 that's going to be printed, or you can update just the vendor only. So once you have all that squared away, you can hit update. And now we can rerun our 1099 backup proof. This should now reflect our changes of the manual one we entered. And again, go through, proof all of your vendors, make sure you have the correct list of 1099 vendors. This backup report should be an exact copy of what you're going to get printed out when you go to print the forms. As long as this looks good, we're ready to keep moving forward. So if you print to a line printer and print directly from finance, you'll run this print 1099 form step. Before you print any forms, check out your 1099 header maintenance. This should have all of your information, and this will all get filled out on the 1099. So make sure all this information is correct and update before you go on to print anything. So again, if we're printing to a line printer, we can do our 1099 print, select the printer that we're going to use, and say OK. And that would start printing out like any other report check run that you do. It'll just start printing out to make sure you may want to print an alignment to make sure your forms are aligned. Then after that, you would run all of your M's and say OK. If we're using Magfiler to print, if we're using Magfiler or authority forms, you're going to use the 1099 Mag Media menu. When we click here, you're going to have a media type drop down. This is where you can tell it if you want to use Magfiler or if you want to use authority forms.
They have to print not forms, either local or paper.
Okay, so I skipped a step here. Sorry, we're going to backtrack real quick. Debbie reminded me. Before you can do it, everybody does have to go through this print step. Even if you're not printing, you need to just send them to local because that builds the file. I forgot about that step. So we'll say OK, and this will just send them to your screen and you can close it. That builds the file for Magfiler or authority forms. And now we're ready to go under our Mag Media menu. First one we're going to do is for Magfiler. We tell it the tax year that we're doing and what forms we want to use. Mostly it should just be M's from here. You can tell it local, put in your authorization, and say OK. Now it's going to put this 1099M data file out in your data folder that we're going to want to pull into Magfiler. So we'll say OK. It'll give you a proof report, again, of all the forms, how many and how much. And at this point, we need to move over to Magfiler to actually print our forms. Magfiler should be going out very soon. They're actually sending out flash drives this year instead of disks. You'll just plug the flash drive in and it'll install. Very similar to last year. If you have any issues, just give us a call. So when you open Magfiler, it looks like this. You'll always start with Continue with Magfiler. You won't have these payees already entered, so you would start with a new payer. You would put in your information here. And then down here, you're going to select what type of forms, because you use Magfiler for 1099s and W-2s. These will be your 1099s. If you're doing W-2s, you have a W-2 option. We'll go over that in the webinar later today. So we find our 1099 forms. And we want to unclick that e-file and do batch print. Once we have all that set up, we can do a save. And now we should see that menu option over here. So now if you have this menu, your payer highlighted, you can click on your payees. And now you can do an import. So we do an import. We're going to do a predefined Magfiler import format. If you browse, You'll have to go out to your data file. And we should be able to find that 1099m.dat that we just created a few minutes ago. So we want to go ahead and open that. If you're pulling this in for the second time and you need to override everybody that's in the payees already, you can check this box. If you know you may have people that have the same social, it'll actually combine those records for you. So you should check that box. If you know you need separate ones, don't check that box and they'll get separate 1099s. We can say OK. Next, it's going to ask you what is the file type, and we are the CMI 1099 right here. We will say select. It'll import the file, and you just need to verify the totals. So here's our total for our 1099s. If you want to print the totals or run a report, you can do that. Again, you probably have so many proofs, it may not be necessary. And then these will show your actual 1099s to be printed here. Verify everything else looks correct in here, and we're ready to print forms. When we print our forms, most people would have a 2-up form. So that's what we want to check. And then our next step, do we want to send them to the printer? Do we want to send them to the screen? Do we want to print just single payees, or do we want to print all payees? I would start with screen and all payees. Run a print. And now this is going to show you exactly what's going to print out on the form. You should get 1 and 2 for each record. Treasurer 1. If you wanted to go ahead and save this as a PDF, you could save them. You could print from this PDF file as well if you wanted to. I know a lot of people like to have a saved copy of their 1099. You can save that wherever you'd like to save it. If you're ready to go straight to the printer, again, you just would do your print forms, say the printer, do all your payees, and say print. And then it will go to the printer. Any questions on that 1099?
Tell me how to change that default printer.
People can ask a question. Don't do that. All right. Sorry, guys, we missed some questions. We were looking at the chat box instead of the questions box, so we'll go over a few of these questions now.
Tell me how to change that 1099 printer.
Oh, okay. Before we do that, Debbie wants me to show you. So when you go into your payees and you do your print form, it's going to tell you what printer's down here. If you need to change this to a different printer, you need to go to Start, Printers. It might be called Devices and Printers on your system. Find the printer that you want to print to, and then you would just right-click and say Set as the default printer. And that's what it should print to. All the way out, or?
I think you go all the way out.
And when you go back into Magfiler, it should now be that default printer we selected. Okay. Let's go over a few of these. So we had a question about using budget prep to enter. If you want to do that, we can do that one-on-one. I think it'd be a little bit better. I don't think I have the right data to do that in the webinar, but we can go over that. Okay, so the PO need to be 0 if it's a credit carry forward. Technically, you're not supposed to carry over any negative PO lines. So if it's a credit carry forward, adjust it to 0 and then add the credit back on once it's carried into the new year. That credit will go, that one credit line item will go against your 2017, but since it's negative, all it's going to do is increase it, so it actually won't hurt you there. Method 3 for entering the budget. In our documentation, we only have 1 and 2. Method 3 may be budget prep. If you're looking at an old document, it may be budget prep, and like I said, we can go over that one-on-one. Just give us a call, and we'll go through that together with you. I wish I could. Oh, there we go. Okay, by reset the PO date, I think you may mean set the posting date on the PO. So if you do get into January before you get your month closed and you need to make any PO adjustments, you will have to set the posting date back. You can do that under your end of month processing and set posting date, and you would just want to move that back to you know, a December date, a 12/31, and do this before you go into the POs, and it'll use this date to adjust any POs or any encumbrance amounts. Sorry. Okay, so if you make edit PO change or 1099 changes like we did here with our manual 1099, if you go back through this process, it will wipe out any of the changes that you made. So if you've done your changes, don't run back through this step. If you want to run this step to maybe find out how many 1099 forms to have, you can run that and then rerun it again. Just be aware, if you go into the manual and make any changes and then rerun this process, you will lose the manual changes. As far as I know, 1099-F, we do not have that capability. Is it? Do we print?
There's data that we don't track on our system that's needed on
That's
that.
on
We've
that.
not put that in there.
Yeah. So nothing with the 1099-S has changed. There will be an end of year FinX update. It's currently in the final stages of testing. Shouldn't be too much longer, and we will add that to the user forum where you can download it. We'll send out an e-news as well when that's available. If you need any help getting that loaded, we'll be more than happy to help. Just let us know. Magfiler is not the same as authority forms. Authority forms is what is part of your service agreement. We send it out to you to print forms if you use laser printers. If you use a line printer, again, you're just going to use the application. Authority forms is a standalone product that we offer that does any form print, check, PO, 1099, W-2, using a SQL database and to a laser printer. Some people like it just because they can completely customize their form. and use authority forms to print all their forms from client-server applications. So you're looking for like a walkthrough doc.
It'll come up with Magpie.
So if you're looking for a walkthrough doc for Magfiler with screenshots, that will come with your Magfiler flash drive for installation. You should get those instructions. So if you have a voucher carryover and you don't want it expensed in 2017, the only way to do that would be to print the check in 2016 before you close your December month. There's no way to carry over a voucher that's not attached to a PO into the new year and still use your prior year budget. It has to be expensed with a 12 December date. The webinar, when we get done, will be posted online. We do have to convert the recording and get it uploaded, so look for that early next week. And we'll again send out an e-news with those links if you want to rewatch. So the FinX download, or the FinX update, do you need it before you close the year? As far as I know, no. There were no changes for that. You can close the year. You can do 1099 processing. None of that was affected in the update. Just process improvements and bug fixes for the most part. All right, I think we caught up on questions. Sorry about that, guys. We'll keep an eye on this one now. If you have any questions, just keep sending them in, and we will continue on. So now we are going to look at printing forms with authority forms. So we can do our 1099 mag media. This time we're going to do, our file type is going to be for our authority forms, tax year 2016. Our form types are M's. And use your authorization. So again, if you have authority forms, you should notice this processing flag down here, authority forms. As long as it is open, will automatically find the file. So there. I have to relaunch it. I sorted it incorrectly. Okay, so your new job will always show up right at the top. If you right-click and show the detail, you should see the two forms that we have in here. So there's our two different vendors. At this point, we can right-click and do a print. If you wanted a PDF copy, you could drop this down, find a PDF printer that you have on your system, and say OK. It'll have you save this file somewhere. I believe I have a... No. We can do a save, and then our forms print correctly, we can say yes. Again, you'll get that proof every time with how many forms and the amount. So if we go back, we can look at the file we just saved. And again, this will just be a PDF. With authority forms, we have many copies of this form. You just need to pick out whichever one you're using. More than likely, it's going to be copy B, copy 2. That's the most common for a 2-up. But then you'll have this PDF file. Again, you can print from this if you'd like to, or just keep it as an electronic save copy. When you're ready to actually print to the printer, you can come back in and print. It's going to ask you if you want to reprint the entire job. You can say yes. And then just select the printer you would like it to print to and say OK. Okay. So now we have been through just about everything. We have our 1099s done. We still have the December month open. So before we actually go close the month, we want to make sure we get any of the reports that we'll need before we actually close the month and potentially lose any of that data that was there. Most of the reports now can be run in priors. All of your budget reports, anything as far as month-to-date, year-to-date revenue reports, current and combined expense reports, they can all be run in the prior. So again, run through, print them and save them to an end-of-year folder. But if you forget anything or miss anything, at least on the budget side, they can all be reprinted in the prior with the same data. The reports that you're going to want to get before you close the year are, again, those vendor reports. These will reset. So the summary purchase listing, you'll want to get a copy of that printed and saved before you close the year. The detailed transactions, you'll want to run this for each of your revenue, expense. If you wanted it for budget, you could do that, and definitely don't forget about bank down here. And then just enter your starting month, so 1 ending month 12. For bank, you're just going to do a starting of 1 ending 9999, and run these off to get all of your transactions for each bank. When you're running this for revenue and expense, especially expense, this report will take a while to run. Just because it is so large, you probably have quite a few pages of data. We don't have near as much, but just give it time. It will run. If it's been more than 5 or 10 minutes, you can give us a call, but it can take up to that long to get it to generate, just because of the sheer amount of data that is on there. Oh, thank you. So with authority forms, you will still need to send copies to the state and the IRS. Missed that step. Thank you. So once we do, again, under your 1099 mag media, you have the IRS file right here. Same process, 2016. Your M forms, authorize. And this will spit IRS tax out into your data folder, and then you just need to upload that file to the IRS. It'll give you this proof report that breaks down each of the items and then totals it out for you. So you'll do that step no matter how you print, whether it's mag file or authority forms or using the system. With paper copies, yeah, you'll just run them off from authority forms as a second copy and send all those in together. Is there a reason you still send paper copies? And then if you want to discuss that, we can. Okay. Yeah, if you only have around 50, that's fine. Yeah, if you're going to do paper copies, just run through the print process twice. Well, probably 3 times. One for your records, one for the vendors, and then one for the IRS. Okay. So we ran the detail. Reports. The last reports you're going to want to definitely make sure you get before you roll the year are going to be the encumbrance and PO reports, because again, these are only current year and will reset once you roll the month. So make sure you get your encumber by account and fund, run that wide open with your 1231 cutoff, especially if you're in the month of January. Print and save this copy. Again, should be all your carryover POs at this point. And any of these, again, if you wanted any of these reports for year end, you would want to run those now. Again, the encumber by account and fund is going to be your biggest one. You're definitely going to want that one. So you get all those in priors. Okay. If you have any other special reports from your maybe FR reports that you would run, again, make sure you run those off. Those cannot be ran in prior. So you'll want to make sure you print or save those reports before you roll the month. Okay. So at this point, we've got all of our reports. We've done our 1099, our budget. We are ready to go ahead and roll into January. Before you do that, at this point, you would want to do a file save of your finance system. If this is towards the end of the day, your system should do a file save every night. So if you know towards the end of the day you've gotten all this done, just log out, let the system run a nightly backup, tell your IT that you need to pull that backup, or whoever does the backup, tell them to pull it and mark it as your end of year backup. If this happens in the morning and you need us to run the backup manually, we can do that as well. Just give us a call. We'll run it off. Make sure you have it to whatever you use, a DVD, a tape, whatever that backup media is. We'll copy it to that, set it aside as your year-end backup. If anything does go wrong with the month roll, we will need that backup, or we will be forced to use whatever the last backup you have, and that could basically lose quite a bit of data that you've entered at the end of the year. So make sure you back up your account, or have us back up your account before you close the month. Okay, so closing December and closing the year is just like closing any other month. Under your accounts payable, under your end of month processing, you're going to want to do your closed cash month, enter your date, and enter your 12 for your month close. Okay. If you have any batches open, they'll show up here. Transaction batches are all in the budget menu. We need to go find out what that one is. If you run the transaction batch status report, this will show you all the batches you have out there. There's our 2 budget batches for January. It looks like we have a revenue reduction batch for December that we need to get rid of. So you can go ahead, already closed, good. All we want to do is run the update. So again, if you forgot to process any batches and it is going to change your numbers, I would definitely recommend starting back over, rerunning any reports, and then rebalancing the month after you posted any batches that were hanging out there, just to double check all of your end of month numbers. So again, we'll enter our close date, our close month, and we'll authorize. Say OK here. When you're doing this step, it would be smart to make sure everybody's out of finance before you run this step. If anybody is in finance and has a record open, this process will hang and it will close the month, and you can run into issues. Okay, so if this appears we've only got about maybe 20 minutes left. We're going to go ahead and close the month. We're going to verify some numbers and update our budget batches. So we're not going to take a break. Like I said, we'll just be about 20 more minutes. Okay, our month did close. If you ever think that this is hung up, do not force close finance. Call us, get us on the phone. Do not force close finance. That will cause many more issues. They can take a while to run, and like I said, if someone's in something, as soon as they log out, it'll continue to run. We closed our cash month. We're going to go ahead and close our voucher month. Voucher months usually tend to close pretty quickly, so that should be good. Now we're in the new year. We're in the month of January. First thing we need to do under our budget menu, we want to make sure that everything did actually reset. So make sure you run the current, not the combined. The combined will show your carryovers. So run your current expense report, wide open. Our year-to-date expenses should all be 0. We don't have a budget. We haven't loaded our budget, so our appropriation should also be 0. Everything on this report, these numbers here, if you remember, I had all of those vouchers that were not attached to POs. They carry over and they immediately go against your encumbrances for 2017. So that's why those numbers are there. If you have none of those voucher carryovers, again, this report should read all zeros. Most importantly, your year-to-date expense column should be zeros. Do the same thing for your revenue. You can run a month-to-date, year-to-date revenue report. Budget should be 0. Month-to-date and year-to-date receipts should also be 0. I may have some goofy data in there. This should be zeros. You don't carry over any receipts. This just looks like bad data on our system. Okay, so we've looked. It appears everything is reset. If you want to go ahead and run on your GL menu, where is that? The posting. Yeah. Okay, so under your GL menu and your special functions menu, you have the display month close status. You can run this and make sure that your vouchers, disbursements, and cash receipts are all in the current month. If you're a GL client, give us a call. We can run through the additional steps that we'll want to take to roll you into the new year, and then your 2016, well, 2016 will be your current, and then 2017 will be your alt year. And we can go through that together for those clients. Okay, so we've checked. Everything appears to reset, looks good. We want to go ahead and get those budget batches updated so that people can start entering vouchers and POs for the current year. Our revenue budget entry, we had our batch out here. We can now close it. can go ahead and run our proof. Again, double check that all of your budget amounts are correct and that the total is what you expect for your entire revenue budget. And then go ahead and post this. We'll do the same thing for our expense. We'll go back to our expense budget entry, pull up our batch, make sure everything looks good. Go ahead and close the batch out. Run the expense budget proof. Make sure your total is what you expect it to be. And then go ahead and update that batch as well. Okay. So at this point, you can go back and rerun those current revenue and expense reports. And you should see your budget posted here. And at the very bottom, you should have the correct revenue budget total. Same thing for expense. If we run the current, just want to see our current year. It should show all of those budget entries we made. And at the bottom, it should show our correct expense budget. In addition to that, you can run the combined, which will now show your current with your carryover. So this will have this number down here should now be the current year budget, plus if you go back and look at your open PO status, your encumbered by account and fund, whatever that carryover number was, if you add that to your current year budget, it should match this number. And this is your combined report. Combine your current year and your carryovers. Once you have that done, you are done. Verify everything is correct. You do have a couple other items you can look at. If you do auto PO numbering, you'll want to go ahead, if you use the first two digits as the year, which is common, you want to go into your purchasing menu under your special functions, your PO class maintenance. You put in your type, and you would want to reset this to 17. So 4 zeros, this means the first number that you're going to use is 170001. If you wanted the first one to be 170000, you could put in 169999. Up to you. Update that, and make sure you do each of your PO types. To reset that number. If you need to create a new fund for 2017, but you don't want it to show up on any of the 2016 reports, you could go into your fund maintenance, not expense inquiry, go into your fund maintenance, enter your fund, give it the name that you want, update it. Go back into the fund and make it inactive. If you created we must have accounts. But if you create any accounts, you'll need to inactivate the accounts first. If it's just a brand new fund, you won't run into this.
They'll always get the asset, liability, and equity accounts automatically in the new fund.
Oh, and it creates. Okay, so
Back in it.
yeah, you'll have to go back in and inactivate any accounts on that, so you can run. I guess Debbie said it does update a few accounts immediately as you update that. So if you go in here, run off your new fund. So it does immediately give you these few accounts. You'll want to go into account maintenance and inactivate these first. So just change this to an I and update. Once you have each of those, you can inactivate the fund. It won't appear on any of the 16 reports you run. And then as soon as you roll into 17, go back in and just reactivate the fund and those accounts, and you'll be good to go. Any other questions?
Where they get the doc. Where they can get the doc.
Okay. We can, if you don't have the documentation already, it is available on our website. If you scroll down here, we have this end of year documentation. So if you click, and then you can just click on whichever one, and you can open or save it, and it's the PDF. That'll walk you through all of these steps that we just did. All right. At this point, we are done. If there are no more questions, thank you everybody for attending. If you do have any questions, give us a call, shoot us an email. We can answer any of those. If you'd like to set up a time to walk through any of the end of year processes or 1099 or budget uploads and want to schedule a time, give us a call. We can make sure that happens. So again, thank you guys and have a great day.